I realized that it actually is about the choices the farmer makes.
You came to kind of a general realization that the nutrient density of the food was directly correlated with the nutrient density of the soil.
Welcome to Commune. We are on a mission to inspire, heal, and bring the world closer together.
Okay, Molly Chester, welcome to the Commune podcast. Great to be with you.
Me. Nice to be here.
Yeah, so I'm wearing my Apricot Lane Farms hat. This one is a relatively new variety, but as I showed you before we jumped on, I have the significantly more crusty version here for those of you enjoying this on YouTube or other video platforms. And I'm sure you have some crusty ones. I know John does, that is featured very heavily in the film.
They are very. You definitely have like your go out hats and your day-to-day hats.
Yeah, this one I have vowed to not work out in, and so far I've done a pretty decent job, but it's pretty fresh still, because I came to the farm about a month ago or so with my friend Casey Means, the doctor, and had a wonderful visit. And it's cool because I get to see the farm almost like I see a nephew or something. I see it like once every couple of years, and I say, "Oh my God, how you've grown," like you would say to a nephew, but you see it every single day. So it's probably a little bit more difficult for you to see how much incredible progress that you make, but it is just stunning. So
Aww.
I love coming up there.
I love to hear that. I love, we have different friends that we've known since we were little, as everyone does, in the sense of Apricot Lane Farms being young. And I love when they come back later on, because you're right, I don't totally have that perspective. And it feels good because we've been on similar journeys too. If we found ourselves back then connecting, we're both in like a sphere of, caring about the earth, caring about connection. And so it's nice to see that you think it's improved.
Yeah, well, it certainly has. And, my first trip to the farm, well, actually, that's not true. I made a trip once prior, but the first significant trip was was at the inception of Commune. So we were just like the smallest little team, and our very first offsite, the very first month that we were in existence, was to the farm. And we still have many of those people are still with us, and obviously we've grown as you have, but that was just such a seminal experience for our team, and I'll always remember that. So thank you guys for being so generous, and congratulations on this. I guess I could really only call it a pièce de résistance. I've been just in France, but it's really just a masterpiece. I think the last time I saw you, I told you there are many books out there in the world, but this really piece of art stands on its own. So well done. I know what the gestation period of a book looks like, and it's not simple. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me to hear that from you, because I do know what crosses your plate. And
Yeah.
So just deep thanks for that.
Yeah, well, I will also add that, so last week was my birthday.
Yay, happy birthday.
So, thank you. 52 orbits. So for my birthday party, I convened 12 of my very, very good friends for a dinner party, and I collaborated with our chef from Commune Topanga, Ali, to cook from the cookbook this past Saturday.
Wow!
And yeah. So we spent and then we talked about it, and Ali talked about it, and I talked about it. So I'll share with you some of the stuff that we made. We made right from the cookbook.
Oh my gosh, this is so cool! Thanks.
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, and it was such a treat for all the people that came, because we got to talk about the farm and what you guys have done, and then just represent it and reflect all of your culinary brilliance. So we did this crostini with blackberry fig jam with the caramelized onions. Oh my God. And the chef and Ali actually made the homemade ricotta as well with it. And it was insane. We did the squash and ginger soup. which has a good little kick, nice kick to it. So this was a very like warm fall feast. So so that's on page 108. You see, like a cookbook really starts to take on a dimension when it starts to get properly dog-eared, right?
Yes.
You know, I'm still at the beginning process. You know, when these get discolored and there's like a coffee stain here, you know, it's like then you're really in. And then we did the slow roast chicken with the lemon fennel crust, and I that's got to be probably a staple in your world, right?
It is. I love that you did that one. That evolved because when you work with pastured birds, so at the farm, all of our birds have, more room to roam. And the meat, I found that when great chefs would cook that meat, the breasts always came out nice, but the legs would often have like a bloodiness to them, and then it was like really tough. And so we played for a long time and realized that you actually have to cook pastured meat almost more like a shoulder cut of another animal. It has to be treated like a tougher cut. And so you have to cook it low and slow as you would those things. And when you do that, then those legs and thighs become really delicious and fall off the bone. So that's where that came from. And we cook it maybe once a week up at the farm kitchen.
I bet, yeah, it's got to be, especially like a wintertime staple, because it's made for such a wholesome meal. And I did notice that the roasting period was longer, and that you actually remove the breast, I think, first, and you keep some of the darker meat in for a longer period. And so I thought that's interesting. And these are the things that, as a student of nature and of food, that you learn and you pick up by just being in it in the process, totally. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
And then let's see, we did the Mexican cacao avocado pudding. That was insane.
And that is a riff on we had an avocado pudding that it wasn't chocolate. It went in a different direction. But in the early days, I was trying to make a smoothie, and it came out so thick it was like a pudding. And we served that for so many odd things on the farm when we had only like 20 people here. I remember one time a super beloved goat died. So I made this. I'm like laughing just because it's odd, but the goat was sad at the time. And so I made avocado pudding, and we all sat around and like toasted Guppy the goat with the avocado pudding. So it has roots.
It has roots. Yeah, well, Allie had just come back from Mexico, so she actually had some cacao from Mexico. And one thing that we didn't try that is on my hit list is the avocado ice cream. So I can't wait to try that.
You got to try that one. So John, whenever we were starting writing the book, he's always wanted like an avocado ice cream product line. He's just talked about avocado ice cream forever. And he said, I want a dairy-free avocado ice cream. So we set to work, and it took us a long time, but where we got is the creamiest. You just really don't even know that it's dairy-free. So it's super creamy. It's got lots of egg yolks, so it's very nutrient dense, and it just totally works. So I do look forward to you trying that. And if you get geeky, the Nabal avocados, which we have here, so we'll sell them at the farmers markets in the fall, and they are, of all of them, they're the best with that ice cream. So.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, because you have, if my memory is correct, maybe 17 or 18 different special varieties of avocados now. Is that right?
We do. Yeah, we actually call that area kind of the Avocado Conservation Project. Just kind of, we made it up because it is true that what you get in the grocery store is Hass. That's what it is. Every now and then it's lamb Hass, but its large majority is Hass. And we just had, we wanted to expand that and to just save some of these varietals that are not widely used because they have thinner skins or don't store as well, or they're confusing because like maybe you eat them when they still have green skins, and that's not what people are used to with Hass. And so we've come to know and love many different varieties like read that Nabal. I actually found Nabal because I read online that it's avocado grow. They called it avocado growers tree that they always have just for themselves on the farm. So it's like, ooh, I have to get some of that. And
Right.
it's true. It's like very nutty and creamy. And so, yeah, we love and we like to cook from variety. You know, we like to really get to know the difference of all these foods and then build the dish around that.
Yeah, well, biodiversity is your middle name at this juncture. Um, and yeah, I mean, the Hass variety, they have thicker skin and they're of a certain size that I think has contributed to their popularity because you can ship them and pack them pretty easily, right? And so then people get used to that taste and then that's what they want. But I think what you guys are doing is really cool, and how much fun to have a laboratory at your fingertips, right?
It is super fun. And then it also enables you to have avocados pretty much year round. We have maybe like a 3-week period where we won't have them. And the Hass, quite honestly, it's still one of my favorites. So there's a reason why it's as popular as it is, but it's just not the only game in town. There's a few others that are also delicious.
Right, and seasonality, as far as kind of culinary philosophy, is such a huge part of your deal, and anyone that's really focused on farm to table. So normally Hass, and not to hover too much on avocados, but I know the farm has a huge prevalence of avocados, and you inherited some of that, and then had to reconfigure considerably. We can get into that, but I think it's really just very, very cool to be playing with a whole diversity of avocados, and I'm curious if you've ever done any blind taste testing there.
Ooh, blind taste testing would be fun. We have had kind of guacamole contests and things like that, but I don't know that I've done blind tasting, but it does bring up a good idea. Now I want to try.
There you go, participatory Christmas.
Yeah,
There you could do.
yeah, exactly.
But you know, we've gotten so used to being able to kind of dial up in the palm of our hand, kind of instantaneous delivery of a Hass avocado 24/7, 365 days a year. And that's just really not how nature was designed to function. So,
100%. No, that's
yeah.
so when I first started cooking, I it really was I was drawn to food because of how what you eat can affect how you feel. That was really I never wanted to be like the next top chef. I just wanted to learn how to cook so that I could learn how to heal, really. And then but once you go deeper into that, then I started learning about these amazing traditional cultures that knew how to work with food using techniques like soaking and sprouting and fermenting. And that was super interesting. And I just remember carrying around Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon, which is a book that tells lots of those kind of techniques, and just saying, this is my favorite book. And I don't even know if I fully understood it at that point. But once I went down that rabbit hole, I realized that it actually is about the choices the farmer makes that then enable you to have nutrient dense food in the kitchen to then maximize with nutrient dense techniques. So we started seeking out farmers that were doing things in the way that we wanted to cook with. And it led to us not being able to find the types of eggs that we wanted to work with. So we said, what if we have 10 acres and start, raising our own birds? I just wanted a lemon tree in my backyard. And then we met our partners, and it blew that idea into a much larger sphere. But then the interesting thing is, once then I got on the land and started cooking from the land regularly, because part of it is like we're kind of far away from a grocery store. And so you end up just like, we had one rosemary bush the first like couple years. And I remember I cooked everything with rosemary in the beginning. And so you start to feel the rhythms of the land. And then you come to realize that like the traditional cultures absolutely deserve honoring, because what they did was not forget to maintain the connection to Mother Earth. But you realize as you're cooking with Mother Earth that that's actually the source. That's the source of how traditional cultures knew how to do these things. And so then you go directly there, still honoring. And that relationship teaches you how to become a better nourisher of bodies, which is like what the way that I like to look at food.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. And a good segue. I mean, just to rewind chronologically, before there was the Biggest Little Farm, before Apricot Lane was even a glimmer in your eye, you were a chef, and you came to kind of a general realization that the nutrient density of the food was directly correlated with the nutrient density of the soil. And was your vision at that juncture? I mean, you said it was like a 10-acre plot that wasn't as absurdly ambitious as a 240-acre regenerative farm at that juncture, but you were pretty keen on a vision of biodynamic and organic farming. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I didn't know, even a fingernail worth of information that I know now. But
Yeah.
where I was that I knew organic. Back then there wasn't such thing as regenerative. All there really was this like organic. It's healthier, and yet. So I started to learn that like, oh, okay, I did understand that like it's about the soil, similar to how in our bodies, obviously it's the building of that gut of our body is then what enables the digestion and the nutrients to actually be absorbed within the body. And the earth is the exact same. So I had that understanding of kind of going into farming, knowing that it was about building that soil. But then beyond that, I had really only known where you like, how do you learn how to do that then, And I had heard organic, so I started researching that, and I realized though it's a positive step, it's really just, you can't use this toxic synthetic chemical, but you can use this less refined version of a like more natural chemical. And it didn't have anything to do with the soil, really. It didn't have anything to do with a holistic approach. So I had heard, it was actually Tom Cowan, who's a great mind. He had spoken about biodynamics. And so I went on the website, and it only took me like 10 minutes of starting to read their, I don't know I forget what they call it, but like their manifesto or whatever their approach is. That I knew that was something that I wanted to build my life towards, because it felt like a process of, it would talk about things like treating the land, of like trying to find the fertility of the land within the land, and saving 10% of your land to natively flower so that you have that kind of native intersection with your crops. And so that was like, I want to go there. And then once you start going there and actually building your own farm, you realize that it's actually nobody has the answers for you. It's just like your body. You then can pull from all of these wonderful tools in your tool chest. So you want to keep learning so that you have biodynamics and now a lot of other things we use. But it's about that relationship and figuring out what this land in this climate wants from you as its steward.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point, because while there are certain general precepts that can inform this idea of biodynamic farming or regenerative farming, just like humans have their own individuality as it pertains to their own health, specific place has their own individuality as it pertains to agriculture. And so, what some techniques that might work one place might not work somewhere else. Now, there's obviously, I think, you outlined and pointed to some of those precepts of essentially a biodynamic farm being able to inspire and generate its own fertility. And there's like techniques like composting and integrating animals and cover cropping and crop rotation. We can talk about kind of some of the techniques that you guys specifically use. But I'm sure that, you had to, quote unquote, listen to your specific land to jiggle the key in the lock just right to open it. And just like everyone has to sort of jiggle the key kind of around their own personal individual health. So I think it's a really interesting point. So when you took the farm over, which was, I think it was that in 2011, what was the condition of the farm and the soil at that juncture?
It was completely devoid of life, like completely. It truly was like a parking lot or something. The soil was so hard. And in my rose-colored glasses, it was like the most beautiful place I've ever been in my entire life. But
Yeah.
really, I just was attracted to like space and the idea of it. But the reality of it was that it was really, really bad. And we just had to, it was one step at a time of faith. And thankfully, back then, we had an amazing mentor named Alan York, who's
Right.
was such a funny road to get him to actually help us. He basically kept telling me why I didn't want to work with him for like 6 weeks before finally I was like, Alan, I have made the decision. I want to work with you. And then he finally came on board.
It's so funny because that's what the great, Zen teachers do. They rebuff you and they rebuff you and they rebuff you. And there's all of these kind of stories in Taoist and Zen Buddhist history of like, students, chopping off their arms and doing anything they can to get master tutelage, and it's very different than the Western approach to teaching, which is the teacher is always trying to get their student to do as much as possible. In this way, it's the opposite. You're just like trying to get absorb knowledge from Alan, and he came. Such a kooky, interesting guy. I mean, obviously, I didn't know him, but I've seen interviews with him, and to be connected to that lineage of biodynamic philosophy from him to Alan Savory to even back to Rudolf Steiner, who was writing about it about 100 years ago. Just to have access to that. Good for you for your persistence, because I'm sure that was pretty influential to have him early on.
It was amazing, and we kind of reached him just at the right spot of his life, because he had spent in his early days, he learned from like Alan Chadwick and a bunch of really great minds in the industry, and he then spent a lot of his career just not really doing that kind of like gardening or fruit orchard farming, and he instead worked in grapes for a long, long time. And so I think we were kind of this amazing, I think he may not have wanted to tell me that, but he was very intrigued by what we were, because he got to come here and work with, the crops from his old or early days. And there was just we had like this kindred nature to each other where it did feel childlike to just be able to kind of play in this space together. And then he was also really hard. Like I remember he would come for a whole week, and on Thursday, for whatever reason, he always had like a bee in his bonnet, and felt like perfectionism. He would go out and tell me all the things that I was like not doing. And I would get to the end of that day and just have like such a headache. And then Friday he was fine again. It was just Thursday of every week was going to be hell on earth. But I learned so much. I mean, he was teaching us a lens that, we only had the early glimmers of. And the things that he was speaking about now, we'll go back and watch these videos and think, oh my gosh, he was like, you hear it just kind of like I read Rudolf Steiner's agricultural lecture the first year of the farm, and I'll go back and like pop into that and realize that like at the first year of the farm, I thought, I understand, like I got this. And then now I'm like,
you understand it at an entirely new level. Well, you really feel it more as a product of direct experience versus just kind of intellectually connecting with some of the ideas.
Oh, I love how you said that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm that way with physiological mechanism too. I've read over the last few years so many medical papers and primary source data and clinical research, and when I started with it, I could barely understand every other word, and then you stay with it, And, then you only, get confused one out of every 4 or 5 words. And then, suddenly over time, I think you begin to have a more intuitive sense and a more foundational knowledge, so things kind of make sense within a greater systems thinking mindset. So you arrive on the farm in 2011. The soil is arid and desiccated. So what were some of the essential techniques that you leveraged in the early days to begin to regenerate the soil?
Yeah, it's back then I really didn't know no-till versus, other ways of doing things. But and I really did just, listen to Alan, and he would give me like to-do lists for the first year, and I would like be very a good student. But looking back, it was what we essentially did because there is no till. Alan didn't agree with that at the beginning whenever you're dealing with something as dilapidated as what ours was. His approach was that you do disturb the soil to give it the nutrition that it needs. There's the raw materials in it. So I remember with Block M, which is the fruit basket that you'll see in the Biggest Little Farm, it's got over 75 different varieties of fruit trees in it. And we did rip the soil, which is you get a machine in there to get down to like 40 inches, I remember. And we put a lot of nutrients in it so that when we were on top, we put them on top and then rip them down in. Now, this is on a big scale that I'm talking. And then from there, it was all about getting organic matter into the soil. So we planted the entire block in buckwheat back then. And then we then planted into the buckwheat. And then we used a lot of like mulch around the trees. And then every fall, we would turn that cover crop back into the land. Now, Alan's approach is you do that at the beginning. And I agree with this at this point now. We've tried a bunch of different things. And I do feel this is like when you're dealing with concrete, this is a great way to go. You then stop messing with it because you've gotten enough in there that you're like coming to life. Now, you can do it other ways, but if you want to get the timeline to move a little faster, then that's what you do. And I've come to look at nature left to its own devices is going to regenerate, and it's going to do it on a slow trajectory towards that regeneration through all of the cycle that it goes through. When you step into land and go into agriculture, you are naturally choosing to disturb. You're forming a relationship. So that I have come to honor that as a stewardship, like a shepherd of a flock, and to accept the responsibility that entails and try to live that to my highest light of what I know and learn from my mistakes when I don't. And I find that the land is very forgiving for that effort, that it's not expecting perfectionism out of you, that it's wanting to be in relationship with you. And then you can move things much faster. So the way that we were able to get from like total concrete to something that had a biological life cycle to it was through choosing to step into that responsibility. But that's different than someone that's like, I'm no-till no matter what, which I respect. It just might take a little bit longer than what we walked.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, it brings up a number of kind of philosophical threads for me, but I look at what you've done, and the last time I was up there a month ago, I came home and started thinking about it as really the Tao of farming, that you and the Taoists were obviously great students of nature, and part of the wisdom was studying that nature and then aligning with its current. But that doesn't mean uninvolvement, as you say, because it's understanding your own integral role as a steward, but also as a participant within its system. And so non-interfering is not really an option. I mean, and this is a theme in physics too, of observer's effect. The second we try to look at an electron and we shine a photon on it, we change its behavior. So we have properties ourselves, and we are in relationship as part of this greater ecosystem with the soil, with plants, with crops, with animals, and the best we can do is refine the skill to harness nature's current to basically apply the rudder down its river and make it better. And this is what you guys have done. So when you talk about cover crop,
oh, hang on, I have one more thing to say about that. What came up for me when you were saying that is like I would consider myself that I live more in the spiritual realm than the physical. I'm one of those that's like bumping my head and have to like constantly figure out how to get myself in the physical body. And I feel like what you're talking about is kind of the merging of the physical and the spiritual, and that's like a sweet spot in there, that it is about being in the physical, stepping inside of that relationship, and then also pulling the wisdom from the spiritual.
Yeah. So my trip right now is I'm not as concerned with the idea of why we are here. Because that's an open question. You can walk into Barnes and Nobles and see 10,000 books on that. I don't think anyone's come to a full conclusion on that. But I am discovering that it is much more useful to excavate how we are here, because as you say, these bigger metaphysical ideas reveal themselves because they are patterned in the physical world, in the material world. So you can look at, the grain of wood behind me, which, represents the natural flow of sap. There is a pattern to that spontaneously emerges. And you can see that in the swirl of marble, or the striation of a cloud, or in your muscle tissue, or in, the markings in jade, or whatever. The Chinese have a term for that called li, which is really, the water's course. And so, I'm just, I too am kind of in but not of this world, like I'm floating above this and trying, but I feel like what you're doing, which is studying nature and its patterns, pulls the curtain back on these greater universal metaphysical truths. So, anyways.
I absolutely love that, and I agree. Yeah. Our biodynamic consultant that we use now, that Alan had introduced us to, he helps us make all of our preps and things here and see rhythms the way you're talking about. And his name's Matthias Baker, and he just, everything that you're saying right there, he could riff. His knowledge bank is so large about just like following all those patterns from a flower to, everything. And he'll go up, we have a little school called the Farm School here, and he'll go up with the kids and just like help them start to see those patterns inside of everything that they're looking at. And it's just like, that's the whole thing, is nature is holding all of these pieces. And just if we can pay attention to it deeply, it's got the answers in there.
Yeah. I mean, I think you put your thumb on it. It's really about paying attention. It's like looking, at the natural flow of water, let's say, down a particular pasture or cropland, and then being able to build your irrigation system in harmony with nature, with the natural flow of water, so you don't have to use as much energy. I mean, there's just simple things that you pick up just from being a good observer. So one of the things that when I first came to the farm that struck me was this managed grazing with animals and paddocks, and how you were using animals to contribute to the regeneration of the soil. And can you describe that process a little bit, and how it implicates different animals, and how it leads to, greater, all of the different kind of positive benefits from water retention to greater microbial density, et cetera?
Amazing. Yeah. So this is John really, he built our livestock program, which has been really beautiful. So I've learned in a lot of ways, I kind of came in more of a plant person and he came in more of an animal person. And then it kind of merges together as you go, because you realize like that animals in this way of farming, that's the whole integration of them is how you get to where you truly want to go. They are the master restorers of the soil. And they're so we do use rotational grazing. We kind of mimic the predator prey relationship that you'll find in nature by keeping the animals in smaller sections for a shorter amount of time, which is highly labor intensive to do that. And however, we've found our rhythms over time that the sheep we actually run through the orchards mostly. That seems to be a really good fit. They serve to literally skirt our trees, which is a process that you have to do in pruning where you bring those leaves up higher, but they eat these lemon leaves and the lemon leaves contain properties that help them keep their parasites down. So it's just this symbiotic relationship. And then they are pooping and peeing where they are and trampling down the organic matter from the cover crop that has grown down into a thatch that is over top of the land that protects your soil then and allows all of the worms and bugs to be happy and have moisture down there. And then we quickly move them to another area. And then with our cows, they run in our pastures. And after the cows go through, the chickens come through and they break up all of that poop into allow it to like spread out and then more integrate within the soil, and they will keep the parasites down because they'll eat whatever's in that poop that you don't want to be there. So you just kind of ride the wave of finding the symbiotic relationship between the animals that you have and the land. And there's a beautiful, you may have read it one time, but I was a vegetarian for a long time, and coming back to eating meat was about getting comfortable with the cycle of life. And in a book called The Vegetarian Myth, the writer, she talks about her trying to become a better vegan by growing her own food. And I'm supportive of all diets because they all have different reasons why, they're important in our world. However, she realized that there were only two ways to fertilize. It was either you're pulling from petroleum-based sources or you're pulling from animal-based sources. And when you kind of start to get that, you realize how vital these animals are as a part of your system of building the nutrition in the soil. And it becomes a very different dance. And then it's not about the choice of whether to eat or not eat meat. Isn't necessarily about their value, because you realize you're inside of the cycle of life no matter where you are. When you grow an avocado, you're killing lots of gophers and bees and butterflies and different things. It's that same concept that we were just talking about like being engaged in life. You can't like step out of some of those really tough concepts of life, and animals being a part of your system makes those questions be maybe even more front and center.
Yeah, and it demands a certain level of equanimity, of not assigning advantage or disadvantage to any particular situation, because the biggest obstacles can end up being some of like the biggest wins. Like, for example, you're talking about like the cows, paddocking the cows and they're pooping. And then you're like, oh no, the flies have put all their larva eggs and there's all these maggots everywhere. Like, what are we going to do? And, it's easy to assign, misfortune to that. And then you're like, no, but wait a minute. Chickens love to eat maggots. So bring the chickens in, and you guys develop these awesome, like, mobile chicken houses that you can move around into these paddocks, and you let them go. And then, you're like, oh, great fortune. And, but then you can't get too connected to the advantage, because then there's some other disadvantage, and it's finding this kind of asymmetrical order in there, this kind of teeter-totter where no one's feet are really on the ground.
Totally, and you're trusting that process it literally is like resting into the process of nature's rhythm. And I feel like you can kind of, yes, I'm doing it truly with the natural world, but like a great businessman is doing a different version of that with different variables and yet still resting into the cycles that they're seeing and whatever their focus is. And I just have to
Yeah.
be kind of really close to the source of where those cycles come
Yeah,
from.
totally, totally. But there is organic systems. It's really more about, systems thinking.
Yeah.
So you're very into like systems biology, and so am I. But it's more like systems thinking, because you can have systems thinking and apply it to your org chart within your company. And that is a very, and you can understand, all of the indirect lines that are going on. Essentially what I think of as the Buddhist conception of Indra's net, that the universe is essentially, the structure or design of the universe is this infinite web in which every intersection is a crystalline diamond of water that reflects all the other intersections. And so it's a beautiful, amazing image that I've always been very taken with. But you get to understand the mutual interdependence of all things. And, when you're living on the land the way you do, this becomes, in stark relief. So you've got now all this organic matter, onto the land. You've got your cover cropping, and really, I think what you've started to see was like this massive efflorescence of microbial life. Is that right?
Yes, it just started to just come alive. And, first you just start to see your first few worms, and then you start to see other, pill bugs and different things in there. And then it gets to the point that it extends out from the soil, where you're seeing that with, oh my gosh, now we have barn owls and we have great horned owls. And now there's a screech owl. We've never had a screech owl before. And then you have the birds of prey that are coming in because there's more gophers, because there's more food in the soil. And then you have the gopher problem, and you have to figure out how to solve the gopher problem. And it truly is, you're opening Pandora's box, which is scary. And that's why some people keep Pandora's box closed. But when you open Pandora's box and start to go through the process that you just described of like, oh, this happens and then this happens and this happens, it is surfing. You're finding a way to ride that. You start to not be so threatened and scared by every shocking thing that feels shocking to you, because you actually realize that's like where the passion and the creativity lives inside of that. And then it's following that you might keep going up and down, but you're like on this trajectory of greater understanding that gives you a more stable place of confidence to know that you can handle anything that comes your way, which is like where life can really blossom.
Totally. You become much more comfortable in discomfort. You wake up and there's like 10 million snails on all of your trees. And instead of like freaking out and throwing in the towel, you're looking for natural solutions to solve these issues. So maybe go through, what were some of like the biggest challenges, and how did you find, some of the natural solutions to manage them?
Totally. The one that people love, that's from the film, and we loved it too, is whenever we learned that our ducks could take care of our snail problem. That was just like such a foundational one, where the snails were just everywhere. And when you get ducks into those areas where the snails are, they will demolish the snails like within seemingly minutes, but probably more like an hour. And so
Yeah, and they don't need any garlic butter or anything.
No, they're just ready to go. So that
Yeah.
one's like a super fun and easy one. Another one is the gophers, of learning that the gophers were able to be controlled by stopping controlling things that we saw as predators for our animals. So like coyotes, you actually welcome and form a relationship with the coyote, and you form them with the birds of prey, and those things are always eating your gophers. And there's I've read more about Native American theories on gophers too, that they actually are creating the channels in the land which draw in rain patterns is their approach. So when you start to see that, like, whoa, there is, you stop having bad and good, because you start to see that, like, the thing you're labeling as bad is something that needs to be further understood in order to integrate it and find its purpose in what the greater whole is. And that's like a wonderful space that has a lot less judgment to it that
Totally.
is healing for
Yeah.
us
I
too.
mean, all of a sudden you see gophers that would you'd otherwise maybe associate it with like gnawing at the roots of your trees and being a total nuisance, to all of a sudden they're your swale trenchers or your keyliners or whatever. And it's amazing because that, you know, that they will find kind of the natural course of how water might flow, and aerate your soil. So like, you know, because for example, one of the things that we have to deal with here in Southern California is drought. I mean, you guys are on an aquifer, which is a godsend, but that aquifer can dry up. But, you know, then when there are rains, a lot of your neighboring farms and a lot of more industrial farms, they're just seeing that topsoil just run off, right? But you have created an ecosystem where you're capturing a lot of that water. Can you just maybe talk about the water retention component of this for a moment, because it's so huge?
Exactly. You want in getting organic matter down into your soil, in having things like gophers be alive so that there's holes down into your soil, you are enabling, when it rains, for your soil to be like a sponge. And that's what you want, because when it's super hard, it is basically like concrete. And when the rain hits that, it's just going to sheerly run off and then go down into the barranca and just be carried off of all the land. But if you instead can capture that water then trickles down through the soil back into the aquifers. That is such an important cycle for us. It's why we want to look at, like, why, do we really need pavement in this location? Because that's now they're coming up with wonderful solutions for that, where there's more porous materials that people are using in our world. It's going to keep improving, but that's what you're wanting to try to do. And that cover crop is such an important part of that process, because that's what's creating that sponge-like effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so huge. The topic of water ecology, particularly, here in California, which people don't always associate with agriculture, but people tend to associate kind of the heartland, with these rank on rank, monocrops and stuff. But California, I think, is the biggest agriculture producer in the country. So, dealing with water retention and water ecology is central to the equation.
It's literally the first thing that we do. Like right now, we purchased a small piece of property that closes an easement on the farm, and it's kind of fun to approach it now because we're 11 years in with our understanding. In 10 more years, I'll be like, I didn't know anything. But it's concrete, just like the land was here. And so the first thing we do is go in and listen. So we just spend time over there, like watching what's here, what's growing naturally. And then we start looking at the water. Like, where does the water run? Where is there a bunch of damage to the land because of how the water was running? And then we put in some efforts to be able to channel the water where, we're hearing is best.
Yeah. So I want to tie back some of this Herculean effort to the actual flavor profiles and nutrient density of the food that you're actually creating on the property. So, all of this cover cropping, organic matter, organic compounds, then has led to this increase in microbial life. So bacteria and archaea and fungi, all this kind of good, yummy stuff that sits kind of in the ground and essentially metabolizes the organic matter into different kind of minerals and makes minerals more available to the plants and it essentially increases the nutrient profile of the plants. Is that a fair kind of understanding of what's going on?
Very fair.
Under there?
Yes,
Okay.
that's exactly it. You have more of the micro and macronutrients available to your foods, which then enable all the flavonoids and things that are gonna, and this is, I'm definitely not a scientist, but it gets to the point that what I do know is that then I cook with it and eat with it, eat it, and it's dense food. So like I'll eat a kohlrabi from our land and it has like a sweetness to it and it has a density of flesh and a creaminess to it. And then I'll go even to a farmer's market because we're always competing with ourselves because, we're just here. And so we're like, this kohlrabi is not as good as this one was last year. And yet then I'll go to a farmer's market and get an organic kohlrabi from somewhere else. And it's kind of pithy and lacks that flavor. And it's really because it's not necessarily organic. You have to literally focus in on building that soil.
What's a kohlrabi?
Oh, it's a wonderful, wonderful vegetable. Everyone should know of kohlrabi. It's one of my faves. People here joke with me about how much I like it, but it's just what family is it in? It'd be like, I believe it's like cabbage in cabbage is brassica? I don't know. Is it brassica?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but regardless, it's kind of like a bulb that sits on top of the land, has like a sort of almost a jicama meets a potato. And I just like to slice it up and eat it raw with hummus or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So now, I mean, there is a discernible difference. Well, I guess I'll ask you, is there a discernible difference now in the taste profile of the products of the farm versus let's say 5 or 6 years ago?
100%. I mean, to the point that now it's also about being connected to your land, but I don't really want to eat foods from somewhere that's not the land. I mean, it's like the food tastes really good and it has a strong, density of flavor and it's, the land here, which I love. I have a relationship to what it is. But yes, certainly we, maybe 3 years ago or so, Nathan, who's our director of sales here, he and I the early days, we would just drive around Block M and taste fruits all the time and be talking about when they're ready and when we're ready to sell them. And so we were talking about tomatoes, and tomatoes are hard for us to grow. We do have a virus that we'll get and it can get tricky. And so we're always really critical of our tomatoes. And this year I said, maybe get tomatoes from the farmer's market, get a bunch of different varieties and let's taste them and see what we think. And we came back and of these, he got I don't know, 8 different tomatoes from different places. And there was only one place that was sweeter and more flavorful than what we were doing. And it made me go, oh my gosh, we've literally lost sight of how much flavor comes in over time. But Harry's Berry's Sun Gold tomatoes still beat us every time. They have got it down.
Well, you need something to shoot for, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You need something to raise the bar and keep yourself curious and ambitious. Well, so just to kind of put parentheses around kind of some of the other benefits to the kind of farming that you're doing, and it would be a whole other podcast to talk about sort of some of the carbon sequestration components of it, that the land is actually acting almost as lungs. I think of that metaphor to some degree. We breathe in, we're breathing in oxygen, the land is breathing in carbon dioxide and being able to sequester that carbon in the ground. And there's just unbelievable data out there right now showing just even a relatively small conversion from conventional farming to regenerative farming, what kind of difference that would make in terms of sequestering some of the misplaced carbon in our atmosphere. So huge. Then water retention, obviously just a huge one. And then, just the overall nutrient density of the food, the mineralization of fiber, the fixation of nitrogen, the minimization of the growth of pathogens around the roots. And there's so many different things going on there that are just absolutely amazing and cool once you kind of get into them. But I think, where now you have been able to harness all of that and put it through a creative expression, which is so cool. And I know, John, even though you were very central, obviously, to the creation of the documentary, it was a little bit of his baby, I think, but like now you've birthed, well, you've already birthed a baby, a real one. But that you were able to, and with your team, and I know you give a lot of credit to your team, but that you were able to harness a lot of this knowledge and inspiration and experience into a creative expression. And that's so cool. So can you talk a little bit about kind of what that creative process was like in actually kind of taking the outputs of the farm and then synthesizing it into an actual beautiful cookbook?
Oh, yeah, I will. Thank you for asking. So, yeah, you're definitely right. Biggest Little Farm is beautiful. I loved that it kind of showed our story to ourselves. Like I don't think I understood my story until then I saw it and I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, that actually is what happened. That's, it was
Right.
good to know.
A little dramatized around the edges, but
Yeah,
more or less.
of course,
Yeah.
more or less there. And some of them had deeper, darker places that were,
Yeah,
it's
true.
not easy
Yeah.
to build something. But
Yeah.
they, so in the early days, I had been a chef. And so and I was a private chef too. I wasn't doing it on some large catering scale. So I was used to creativity being like, make a pie. And I really would love the satisfaction of cooking that you would, cook that you'd grocery shop, you'd cook that day, and then at the end of the day, you get to eat it. And then all of a sudden, I found myself on this farm and I was like, whoa, this is creativity on a much larger scale. And I had to learn how to create with a team, have it be that's the extension through to the creativity that you're orchestrating in a different way. And then when the film came out, I actually had a friend approach me and say, now I want to hear your side of the story. And she wanted to connect me to an agent to talk about a memoir. And I was like, I do not have a memoir. And so that is not something that I have anything to
Yeah,
say.
I'm living right now,
Yeah.
right here. I can't deal with memories.
Yes, exactly. Totally.
Yeah.
So but I did talk to the woman who, I said, well, I've always wanted to come back around to be able to write a cookbook. That was like a lot of, the early day dreams. And she said, well, you can do it. And I said, no, I don't. I do not have time to be able to do that. And she said, well, work with a writer. And I was like, no way. I am entirely too creatively controlling to be able to do that. And she said, well, I have a person. So she said, let me just send you these books and see what you think. And she sent me Sourdough by Sarah Owens, who's the person who then I did end up writing the book with. And I read this book and I saw that it was a person who understood the kind of like the world of microbes through the lens of both being a gardener, but also being a baker, a sourdough baker. And we kind of had the same path of obsession with food. And I took a right and started a farm, and she took a left and started a bakery. So I talked to her. I started to think, oh my gosh, I think I can do this if I build a team in the same way that I built a team around the farm and worked in that kind of expansive creativity. And so I did. We had our culinary team here who I've been cooking with for 10 years and working with. We had Sarah, who is amazing. We had Andy Reville, who's was a gardener for us. And then I discovered through us getting to know each other that she was an amazing fine artist. And so she ended up drawing all of we have illustrations of all the avocados, the chickens, all the colors of the eggs, all the citrus on the farm. She did some step-by-step drawings. And it was and then when I was working with Sarah, because you obviously write a lot when you work with a writer too, because you have to get your voice, but Sarah is what she's so amazing at is harnessing information. She almost has this like historical ability and quality to her writing. And I had her come out here. It was during COVID, which was everything was tricky. And, but she met with all of our different team members on the farm because I wanted the book to feel like a reflection of the entire team. I wanted them to open the book even more so than the public and be like, I see us. I see what we've done. And so she did that. and then collated all that information together. So then I was able to come in and really build the personal story element into what it was. And it was I truly will say that it was one of the more grace-filled, easy, not easy, it's hard to write a book, but it was like it flowed just in a way that it was meant to come out, because I never could have done it with all the other workload and my kid. Like, that's like hard line. I got to have time for that. So, but it all came together, and I'm grateful for it, because I truly am proud of it.
Yeah, well, the product is certainly a reflection of that flow, and I very much like the way the book is architected, almost around the physical farm. So you have your larder, and the garden, and the pasture, and the orchard, and obviously some of that, some of the fermentation or the baking are clearly represented. There's a great sourdough starter in there with rye flour, and we do a lot of fermentation here just at home. We do a lot of sprouting at home. We have a sourdough starter, so we make those wonderful big boules, which I know there's a recipe in there in the book for that too. So just to kind of timestamp our conversation, so we're talking, it's beginning of December, or December 7th. So this book is right on time for holiday season. So if there's any kind of special holiday recipes in the book that you would want to tag that might inspire folks as they kind of hunker down with family and do a little more cooking and spend more time around the communal table, anything that you could suggest we focus on?
That's a really great question. I'm actually grabbing my book right now, because I need to.
Yeah, no pressure.
I got to do my holiday cooking, or my holiday planning. But I would say any of the, you're going to have to make it seasonal. But our short rib recipe that we have in here, you're going to have to flip some of the, don't put the peas in, flip with some winter vegetables in there, which is really easy to do. But that is the most kind of succulent, sit around, and it's easy because you're going to be able to do that ahead of time. You aren't taking out the turkey and having to carve it last minute. So that would be a really beautiful one. You talked about some of those fall things that are really nice, as far as the fig, the crostini that you did.
Fig crostini, or the fig jam, the blackberry fig jam with the ricotta and the crostini. My God, ridiculous.
This is a good one. This is a chocolate persimmon pudding, which you again could do totally ahead of time. But chocolate persimmons, it's actually there's not chocolate in it. Chocolate persimmon is a variety, and it doesn't have any chocolate flavor to it. But it's going to be an astringent persimmon. So it's the kind that you wait until they get pudding-like before you eat it. So it's the perfect start for making a pudding. And that's just a delightful cup of amazingness. Cherimoya bread pudding is amazing. That's something that you could serve for dessert. That cherimoya is tricky to work with, because when you bake with it, it can often form this bitter flavor. Because I was set on making a cherimoya, almost like a banana bread, a cherimoya bread, and it didn't so much work out. But when you put it in the bread pudding, we kind of found the right recipe to make it really delicious. So, and then go for any of the chicken recipes. We spent so much time on all of those, and they're amazing.
Yeah, there's such a great selection in there. Like I mentioned, we had the fennel lemon one, which is crisped up the skin just amazingly perfect. And,
totally.
It also just filled the whole kitchen dining room all afternoon with the most delectable perfume. It's one of those things, if you're home and you have some time and you can afford to slow down for a moment. Mm-hmm. There's so much gratification in these kind of long, lingering meal preparations that can, kind of spread out over the course of a day, and you can get your kids and your other family members involved, and like you said, have a participant-oriented, holiday season.
Exactly. I feel like you have to do it. You either have to prep yourself where you have it ahead of time, because Christmas is tiring.
Yeah.
Like anyone who has a kid, you're up at like 5 because they're so excited, and you've been up till like 11:30 getting, everything
Yeah.
done. And so you need there's a wonderful meatloaf in there that's really beautiful, and that you need a meatloaf that you've prepped like 2 days beforehand, and then you just pop it in for Christmas dinner. That's you gotta keep it easy.
You got to keep it easy.
Yeah.
Well, Molly Chester, it's such a delight. I love being in your orbit generally and in your presence specifically today. What you have been able to accomplish is such an unbelievable model, I think, for the rest of the world. And you're really, I think, leaving some important footsteps for those of us who are interested to follow. And so grateful for your work. And again, just congratulations on this stunning book, the Apricot Lane Farms cookbook. I'll hold it up again, but can you tell us, where would be the best place to find this? I'm sure it's everywhere on the normal places, but any place you want to direct us to?
Right now, it's in all the normal places. We aren't yet selling it off our site. That'll be sometime next year. We definitely on our site have a list of all the typical and a couple kind of indie sites that people can go to. And so they can go there to find it out. And while they're there, we have an amazing avocado oil promotion going on right now. So they can check that out too and get a couple bottles for the holidays. But it's on sale as it's not normally. And that's from our beautiful Hass avocados. And so it's a good
And so
one.
you're making that olive oil. Are you making it? Do you have a partner who's actually making it and using your avocados, or how are you doing it?
Yeah, so it used to be, we're actually looking for a presser for next year, but we have a facility locally here that we use. They've just closed, but it was called Ava Pacific, done by a company called Mission, and they've moved to Mexico. So I think we're going to be down in San Diego pressing next year. But we do take our Hass and whenever they're at peak and press them. And this avocado oil is truly a different experience. Many times what you're getting at the stores is a refined oil. And this is a completely unrefined avocado oil, and so good. We do have an olive oil too. Right now the trees are young enough that it's usually in small quantities. So that will come in the January, February, we'll post that on the site. But right now, we're promoting that avocado oil for Christmas. So people can come check us out and get a bottle.
Yeah. All right. Well, Molly, have a absolutely delectable holiday with you and your yummy family and your whole community. And, I guess in closing, I'll also just say, I'm into community. That's kind of been the thread throughout my whole entire life, whether I was putting on big festivals at Wanderlust or with my current concern, which is Commune. And we have our little nest up in Topanga where, we like to congregate like-minded folks. And, I will say just the role of community in what you do at Apricot Lane is in full effect, and it's beautiful to see how you involve everybody there on the farm, all the people that I give the tours. I can tell, they feel so empowered. And I know you do all these big community dinners. I think every Wednesdays you were doing them for a very long time, just with people, kind of your whole internal team on the farm. So you've really just created a beautiful ecosystem in every aspect. And again, it's just a beautiful, inspirational model. So thank you, and to be continued, I hope.
Thank you, Jeff. And quite honestly, the admiration goes both ways, because your mind, I just love even taking the time to talk today, because you are on those threads and connecting them in a way that everything that you say inspires me back. And I love your family too. And I look forward to every time we get to spend together. So just keep doing what you do. We'll just both keep up the work.
Yeah, we'll just keep up the work. I will say Skylar is the number 1 person on the Molly Chester fan club.
Oh, I love her.
She's your biggest fan.
I couldn't love her more.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Take care.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this interview from the Commune podcast, then click subscribe and check out this video right here.